Welcome to today's episode of Focus for Me podcast. Today I'm sitting down with my good friend Donny STARKINS, and we're going to have a great conversation where it comes to his practice in meditation, yoga, as a mindfulness coach, and where he went from leaving a baseball career to where he is now as a well-known, well-traveled, sought-after yoga instructor and mindfulness coach. Thanks for being here, Donny. So today we have with us Donny STARKINS. Donny's yoga journey started in 2005 by searching for pain relief after 7 operations on his left knee and an addiction to painkillers. Fast forward to today, after many years of sobriety, Donny has become one of the dynamic leaders in his industry. He has a professional speaker, teacher, and coach leading classes, workshops, and seminars all across the world. Donny is an ambassador for LULULEMON and works directly as their mindfulness performance coach, as both a yoga meditation teacher and a personal development coach. In addition, he is the official yoga instructor of the Phoenix Suns and educates other professional athletes in the ways of yoga and mindfulness, which is awesome. With an emphasis on mindfulness, he challenges each student, client to explore the things getting in their way of their purpose. His calm, focused instruction and peaceful energy makes even the most difficult scenarios possible to work through. Donny's teaching creates an overall connected, grounded, and inspired experience for all levels of yoga and personal development. Donny's purpose is to help others find their purpose through the teachings of yoga, meditation, and personal development coaching. He is committed to living the yoga practice off the mat and sharing it with the world.
Wow, that was nice.
Thank you for being here. Been super excited to have a conversation with you for over a year, just to explore a bit more about who you are, and you've had quite the journey. And I know we've known each other, about 2.5 years now. So thank you for being here, and I'm excited to dive right into it. You ready?
I'm ready. Thanks for having me. It's an honor to be here having this conversation with you.
Yeah, thank you. It's been a long time coming. So let's just go back for a second and just get us a quick highlight of, what were you doing that started you off on just being addicted to painkillers, and that started kind of this whole journey for you. What was happening in your life, and what were you doing?
Well, if I look back, so in the year 2000, I had what was my 5th surgery on my left knee. I was playing baseball at Arizona State. It was my senior year. Had a really big operation on my knee. It was actually a cadaver transplant of my meniscus. I was the first person in Arizona to ever have this procedure done, but the doctor assured me that if all went well, it would be like having a new knee and I would be back playing in no time. But the morning I woke up from that surgery, I knew I would never play again. And so from that day and for many years after, my world was turned upside down from a life of an addiction to painkillers.
Sure. Can you just share with us what were some of the thoughts that you remember having when you woke up and you remember that experience? That completely changed and altered your life from what the plan you had.
Yeah, so it was the signs and scars of massive trauma and the unbearable pain. So those two things. And for the first month, I was being prescribed 80 Percocet a week and getting no reprieve from the pain. Wow. And a month post-op, I'm sitting there going, the doctor had to have messed this up. There's no way I can be in this much pain 30 days after the surgery. Yeah. And about a month and a half after I turned the corner pain-wise, and a month after, the doctor cut me off cold turkey. So I was going from taking that amount of painkillers to taking nothing.
Wow.
And for quite a while, my story was blaming it on the doctor,
Sure.
Blaming it on the trauma. There was major trauma from the surgery that I had. But at the core, when I finally surrendered, when my life got so bad and I had to check myself into rehab, my parents intervened, I started to get really interested on what the hell had happened to my life. Going from this baseball player, star, that was my identity, to a drug addict. Where did it all go wrong? And so when I started to dive in and do the work of 12 steps and get therapy and just look at what had happened, it wasn't the physical pain. It was actually the emotional pain of the loss of my identity, the loss of my purpose. The only thing I ever knew was baseball. And in one day it was completely taken from me. And I didn't want to feel that pain. And I didn't have these mindfulness tools, these self-love practices that I have today. So I didn't know what to do. So I just numbed it. I numbed it by taking pills because I didn't want to feel.
Do you remember what were some of those initial thoughts or emotions that you were experiencing those first 30 to 90 days?
Oh, it's so tough.
I think it's so like something like that major happens and it's a huge setback, and it's oftentimes the thoughts that we're thinking about that start to really impact, combined with the emotions that set a pace for what's happening in the future.
Yeah, looking back, there's so much there. I start to think about how life continued to go on. Baseball ended for me and my team kept playing. And I don't know what I was thinking, but I just, I always thought that this is what I would do. And so that feeling of loss, and I don't know if I felt it in the first few months. I just know I was lost and confused and still in a lot of pain. Holding out a little bit of hope that, if I just rehabbed my knee, maybe it would get back better. But in the back of my head, I really knew that it was over, and the healing process of the graft that they put in my knee was taking forever. And to make a longer story short, 9 months later, the piece that the doctor put in, the graft, my body ended up rejecting the piece. So I had to have it taken out. And so that whole surgery ended up being a wash. So yeah, it was a lot of trauma and a lot of pain, physically, but at the core of it all, it was I lost my purpose. It's all I ever knew, and I didn't know how to deal with it, and I didn't want to feel, so I just took pills and partied.
And then how long did you experience that life?
It was on and off for a good, I would say, like 10 years after.
Not long.
Not so hardcore for all 10, but definitely not sober, not free.
Yeah.
Still stuck in a lot of the blame and the guilt and just things that my addiction had created, the decisions that I had made, and it just starts to snowball. If you don't finally surrender and get help, you continue to make choices that really don't align with your core values of who you are. And I think just consistently making bad decisions and just watching and witnessing even the pain you're putting your family through and your friends, and just, I got sick and tired of being sick and tired.
Yeah. And
it wasn't until I was fully ready to completely surrender that I was able to actually receive help.
Yeah. So before we move on, what would you say if you were looking back at that time period, kind of that 10-year period, before some things started to really shift and you started the journey that you're on now? What would you say are maybe 2 to 3 of the big moments that would stand out as just big WTF moments for you, whether they were what just happened kind of on a negative side, and also were there any of those on the positive side? So kind of back and forth a little bit.
Yeah. So the negative for me, I think my life had to get so bad, and it wasn't like there was circumstantial things that happened that were bad, but for me it was just like a complete spiritual bottom. Where I just didn't want to be around any of my friends. I don't think my friends probably wanted to be around me much at that point, isolating from everybody else. And so I think when I finally surrendered and went into rehab, I remember laying in the bed that I was in, and that first day in rehab, and asking God, and I don't even know what my relationship was at that time. It was just a foxhole prayer. God, please just tell me what I need to do to get it right. I am ready. Just talk to me. Tell me. And I laid around that day and waited. And that night, so every night in rehab, they would bring in speakers to host or hold a meeting. Mm-hmm. And the first night, 2 guys come in, and it was a Pills Anonymous meeting, and they would rotate the type of meeting it would be. And the guys said things like, go to meetings, get a sponsor, work the steps with that sponsor, get a service commitment. My first sponsor said nobody's ever relapsed that did everything their sponsor told them to do. And I heard it all. I heard it all for the first time. I'd been going to meetings prior to that. And most of those meetings I would go to, I was just trying to keep my family off my back from actually having to go to rehab and stop my life for 30 days because I wasn't going to do that because I had all this stuff going on for me, which I didn't have anything going on. It was just that fear of actually having to do that, or the stigma of actually going to rehab. So I finally heard it the very first day I went into treatment, and I knew after day one what I needed to do to get sober and to stay sober the rest of my life.
What was the final straw or the final step that actually got you to rehab?
It was in an intervention of my family. I think it was, they had tried multiple times, and then just finally just being beat down so bad by the addiction and tired. So I can remember the last couple days of just waking up in the morning and not thinking about breakfast or not thinking about taking a shower or even going to the bathroom. The first thing I would think about was wake up, take the pills so that in 20 minutes, I could have this calm, soothing feeling over my body, and then I could go to work and live life. If I didn't have them, I was so riddled in fear and anxiety. And so it was just this vicious cycle. And so that the fact that it had that strong of a grip on me woke me up finally to the fact that like it is time to surrender.
Yeah. It's a big moment in, I think, all of our lives when we get to that point, because it's a big demarcation for what has been, and then also now to, what's next and what we're creating. Was there anything like in that time period when you were in treatment that you started to awaken, or when did you really start to notice like setting some goals and moving forward from treatment? What did that look like?
One of the first valuable tools that I used in treatment that I still use today for myself and in my coaching, whether you're in sobriety or not in sobriety, is the acronym of HOW, of being honest, open-minded, and willing. And I know if I was told that if I go all in on these three, get honest with yourself, get honest with your sponsor, get honest with your family, get honest with the people around you, be open-minded to taking suggestions, because my way wasn't working out too well. Yeah. It wasn't working out well at all. It had landed me in rehab. Yeah. And then willingness. I associate willingness with freedom. Willingness equals freedom. The more willing I am, the more free I can be. And so there's this coachability thing that I always had as a player, as an athlete. And I just tried to take that coachability and just say yes to anything that was suggested, because it was laughable if I were to finally think that I could do things my way.
So go through that list again, because what I heard at the end of that was the word. There's a word that I heard at the end of that, but say the list again.
Yes. So HOW is the acronym: honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness.
Like if I sum all that up, what I hear is surrender.
Finally, and surrender. When you can finally surrender is when you're able to receive. Yeah. And to finally be able to do it. And the moment that I did it, I started to be able to hear. The fact that I was going to meetings for so long, and I would go to these meetings like I was better than these people. I'm going to these meetings as motivation because I'm never going to end up like these people. That was my mindset when I was still using and not ready. And to think about that today, and now some my closest friends are my friends in sobriety in these meetings. And so once I was able to surrender and open up my heart and be open-minded to taking a few suggestions, everything changed.
And so coming out of that then, where did you start to, so that your baseball career is over, and now like when did you start to unfold that you enjoyed yoga and started moving into that path? What did that look like?
So my first exposure to any type of mindfulness practice was when I was in that first month of my knee operation, and I would be lying in bed and my knee was swollen, bent, and I would have to sleep in a CPM machine that would extend and bend your knee for half the night, and then the other half of the night I'd be out of it. So my knee was swollen, bent, and I was so just whacked out on the pain pills I was taking, and I had these dreams that I was fighting. And I remember kicking my leg out in the middle of the night, and then I would just be dying in pain. My mom was taking care of me, and she would come out in the middle of the night, and she didn't know what to do. She's like, should I call 911? I don't know what to do because I am dying in pain, crying my eyes out. and she taught me pranayama breathing, just simply to count your breath. And I remember getting the reprieve and just being able to actually use that and fall asleep for a couple hours. So that was the first stint. She was trying to get me into yoga years before that, as I was physically kind of a mess from the surgeries and then favoring my left leg for so long, spiritually also. And she would always nudge me and tell me, you need to go to yoga. And she was doing yoga before, here in Phoenix, before yoga was cool. And I would always tell her, yoga's for girls and hippies. I'm not doing that crap.
You've certainly transformed that belief in the yoga community.
Yeah. And that was truly how I felt. Yeah. And finally I went to a yoga class with her at a 24-hour fitness gym, and I took the class, and I knew at the end of the class I would do yoga the rest of my life, just from a physical standpoint. So I tell people.
What was it? How did you feel? What was it about it?
It was the reprieve and the release of my low back and my hips from some of these stretching. If you think about favoring my left leg for so many years, that my right leg and my right hip was taking such a beating. So to get that release, I just knew. Yeah. So physically is how I started, but little did I know what it would do for the mind and the soul. Yeah. And so as I continued to practice, I knew I would do yoga the rest of my life. So I just wanted to learn. I wanted to learn the lineage, anatomy. So teacher training for me was just, it wasn't about being a teacher at first. Yeah. And then I went into teacher training, a week into teacher training. I'm like, I got to share this. Let's go. I'm on fire. I'm quitting my corporate job. I'm going to be a full-time yoga teacher right away. And I actually did that right off the bat, and got a rude awakening that, like, wait a second, first of all, I can't just financially couldn't afford to do that. I was living in this dream world, so I had to kind of scale back and teach a couple classes, continue with my full-time job for a couple of years, and slowly regress out of my corporate world and fully into full-time teaching.
Yeah, and it's a very competitive world out there when it comes to yoga, because it has become so popular, especially in the United States. And how what were some of the goals that you set as you were developing your own yoga business that actually created where you can, where you're teaching 20 classes a week now?
Yeah, so for me, it was connect to the community. Get involved. There was events going on, and I would volunteer and try to get into the middle of the herd of the community, partnering, building relationships with Ian and Vanessa from Spiritual Gangster, with LULULEMON, and really just diving in and leveraging those relationships, setting goals like becoming a LULULEMON ambassador, doing things, and then slowly like making sure that I still had my corporate job. I went from 5 classes a week, still working my full-time job, to like 10 classes a week, taking a different job and working remote 3 days a week, in the office 2 days a week. Then eventually it got to where I was like 15 classes, working a 20-hour contract job, till I was completely able to let it all go.
And what was that transition right there? Just talk about just that transition, because that's a scary transition for many, many, many people, is giving up that reliable comfort of having a steady paycheck come in to now you're completely relying on yourself for anything that comes in.
Yeah, I honestly, looking back, don't think I was afraid. I don't know if it's because I knew intuitively, like, this is my part of my purpose and this is what I'm supposed to be doing. Or maybe I just knew that I could always go back and find another job if it didn't work out.
Well, I think that's important what you just said there. I think that's part of it, is like when you know that, this is in alignment with what your soul purpose is, and there's this, where like everything just works out. I mean, that's how, of all the projects that I've worked on, everything that I've done when it came to developing Focus for me, it was one of those things where, from the very beginning, it was like, I don't know what it's going to take, and I don't care what it's going to take. I'm going to make it it's going to happen no matter what. And so there was this like driving force that drove me, and also this somewhat trust with the universe and surrender to the process, that even if obstacles came up, it was like, okay, well, what's the solution to figuring this out? Because I'm going to keep going. The app wants to be developed. And I think this, and I knew as I progressed with it as well, it was in alignment with what my soul purpose is, like being able to share everything that I've learned into such a format that could support others and, less suffering, creating more of what you want, being able to be mindful of your thoughts and create an inspiring future for that's in alignment with our soul purpose. And it sounds like that was already happening for you about inside of that transition, yeah?
Yeah, so there was definitely, I was never fully comfortable in my own skin in corporate America. Even though I was fairly successful at what I was doing, there was this lack of inner confidence, this inner knowing. But when I would teach a yoga class, I tell people today that I feel more comfortable teaching a yoga class than talking one-on-one or talking to a group or talking into a video. And it doesn't matter. There could be thousands of people at that yoga class in the middle of New York City. Like that I am fine.
Yeah.
Talking one-on-one it's a little different. So I knew there's something that's being channeled. And for me, it's just carrying a message of love and service. I truly believe that yoga saved my life as it is part of the cornerstone of my recovery. I go to meetings and do 12-step work, but the yoga and the meditation is as important as these other, 2 or 3 pillars that I have in the foundation of my sobriety.
So when you set out to, one of your goals you mentioned was to become a Lululemon ambassador. What do you do when you sit down to create goals, or how do goals come to you, and what inspires you?
Lululemon was essential in even teaching me goals and teaching me how to write goals and understanding the difference between, what an achievement goal is and what a continuous goal is, and how to create new habits that will get you to those goals. Understanding like the science of habit forming always tells us to, if you want to create a new practice, to attach it to something you're already doing. And so being able to use just these little tools and staying open-minded and willing to doing it, and just trusting that process through it, and knowing that if this is what's on my heart, I'm not going to let anybody or anything, especially my own thinking, get in the way of that.
What was like something that you attached, like a current habit that you attached to help move your goals forward?
Oh, meditation is the one. So this is the game changer, and it's really changed my life. As far as I used to wake up in the morning and I would grab my phone right when I woke up, and I would react to emails and get on social media the minute I woke up. And I was getting some coaching, and one of my coaches said, I want to take you through this visualization. I want you to close your eyes. You're going to visualize 3 screens. The first screen, you're watching yourself choose social media, grabbing your phone and reacting. The second screen is going to be you choosing meditation. And then the third screen is just a blank screen. And every time I make this swishing sound, I just want you to watch the screens change. So I close my eyes, and she starts to take me through it, and she starts to go shoo, shoo, shoo for like a couple minutes. I'm like, this is weird, but okay. And I open my eyes. She goes, okay, well, we'll see how that's going in the next couple days. The next day I woke up in the morning, and there was this whole nother level of awareness to make a choice. So for like 4 days I did it, and I felt so much better. I was winning my morning. I wasn't as stressed and reactive. Day 5, I'm aware of the choice I'm making, but I just feel the need to go to my email. And then the whole day was just a complete mess. And so the contrast became my teacher, where I just noticed the difference. And I don't ever want to be that reactive or as reactive, and stressful and irritable as I was when I would do that.
That's actually really, really cool.
Yeah. So the meditation would be before I would do the meditation before I would look at my phone. It was typically after waking up, getting coffee, and then doing it. So it was always in the morning, before or after coffee.
And then, what were your early days of meditation? What was that practice like for you? What did you do? Super
simple. One of the apps, the Headspace app, the Insight Timer app, they were typically guided.
Yeah.
I will always try to do a little, and early on, now I try to do a little breath work, a little pranayama, depending on how much time. Some days in the morning, it's still just 2 or 3 minutes.
Sure.
But it's the intention and just making sure that it gets done.
It doesn't take much.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I noticed just setting aside just those few minutes and just getting still I mean, it literally can be a couple minutes, but even 4 minutes, 8 minutes. I try to get up to at least 16, if I'm sitting. But I notice just even within 8 minutes or less, how different my whole physiology of my body changes. And then moving forward, how different everything else is for the rest of the day.
Yeah,
That's
it is
huge.
the meditation and movement. So that first hour has to also involve then whether it's yoga, going to a class, or doing a Orange Theory or some type of movement. Those two things in the first hour of my day are essential.
Why is that essential to you? Why is that important? Adding the movement in with the meditation.
It's all about the way I feel. I want to feel good the rest of the day. I am not doing it to look good. I'm not doing it to lose weight, although I'll gain weight if I don't do it. I'm doing it to feel good, because if I don't, and there's some days the exercise piece doesn't happen for whatever reason in the first hour, and I just feel the tension building. I can feel it in my shoulders, neck, jaw. I am more reactive, less responsive, easier to be agitated, all of these things. And so I know what I am like if I don't get those in.
Now I know why you had that early morning yoga or HIIT class followed by yoga class at your retreat up in Whistler.
Yes.
Yeah, that was an awesome retreat. Okay, good. So any other big goals stick out that you, one, are reaching towards, or one that you've accomplished that you've attached another, like a habit like that to, that's worked for you?
Yeah, so the goals early on were to be a full-time yoga teacher. That was accomplished. The Lululemon ambassador was accomplished, and it was just about making those connections, going into the stores, being somebody more than just a yoga teacher. Like, what are you doing in the community? How are you showing up in service? Because I know Lululemon's core values all are in alignment with community and service and these types of things. And so I selfishly I would see people before me who were ambassadors not do anything with their ambassadorships. And I just looked and I was like, if I get one, I will never be like that. I will go all in, because I understand selfishly what this could do for my life and what it can do for my career. And so as I did my ambassadorship the first 2 years, I was just all in. I was trying to, be at my store, be in the community. And I'm happy to say I'm now going on my 5th year of an ambassadorship. So they've actually extended it 3 times.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, congratulations. And then what else do you do for Lululemon?
So I am I work on their mindful performance team. Lululemon now has brought their personal development, internal personal development in-house. They used to outsource it all to Landmark. So they would bring their ambassadors, employees, all the way from executive level to store and operations to Landmark. And I think we looked at it as wanting to take a more mindful approach to personal development. So we developed a 2.5-day retreat experience called Purpose and Practice, where the employees now on a regional basis all around the world actually will apply or be nominated to go to this personal development experience. And so in the personal development experience, I lead the yoga, the meditation, and am one of the facilitators in the personal development work that we're doing, which is like the dream job. I mean, it is the most amazing thing, and being able to travel and make an impact and really share my message on a bigger stage, but also for a large group, 200, 250 people that are ready to receive it.
I really enjoy your guided meditations, the ones that we did up, at the last retreat I went to with you up in Whistler. And then the follow-up to that, like being able to use that, because it gets so deep into the subconscious that it shifts some things. And then the questions that follow up with that, I think, were so impactful in just looking at myself and my own journey and growth that happened from that. Say a little bit about like how do you transition that and work with the two of those together, doing yoga, meditation, plus the personal growth to go with that?
So I think they all intertwine. They all complement each other.
But they're missed. I mean, they're not usually followed that way in most of the community.
Yeah, and I think I learned a lot of that from my work with Lululemon and following a similar model where it's not yoga then personal development. Like, yoga is personal development. Meditation is personal development. A lot of people think that, the common response I will get to someone that hasn't meditated or tried, they'll say, I can't meditate. My mind never slows down. My response is always, nobody's does.
No, yeah.
And it's not about not
doesn't.
thinking. It's actually about maybe noticing what you're thinking about.
Yeah.
And on a deeper level, it's actually about digging to the root of the problem and pulling it out and healing ourselves.
Yeah.
Whatever's getting in the way, which typically has started with some thought,
Sure.
which has maybe created a story that has maybe even become our truth.
Yeah.
And so I believe that they all intertwine. We can sit there on our yoga mats and go through an amazing class, but to be able to actually process it afterwards and journal, or just during class, ask a couple questions. And then at the end of class, ask them again and write on them.
Yeah.
And the power of journaling comes alive and is complemented by the yoga and by the meditation. And to me, they just all intertwine with each other. And then if, like in a retreat experience, we get to share.
Yeah.
So we share in a safe
that's
space.
That's equally as powerful. I talk a lot about that, like how it's so necessary to get out of your head about it then and actually share it out loud. One, then you're hearing others talk about their experience, but also, and then I think it kind of allows that connection of feeling human in what you're dealing with yourself. But then also it's different hearing it come out of your mouth versus what you're thinking, and then it gives you, for me at least, it gives me a whole different perspective about it.
Yeah,
And that's a lot of what I experienced in your retreat as well.
there's so much truth and power to all of what you just said, and I like to do that type of work. I like to observe it and see and know that if we look at even self-compassion and the components of mindful self-compassion teaches us, the three main components are self-kindness, which we all struggle with everywhere I teach,
Sure.
all these retreats, all this work I do, the common
So
theme,
easy to judge ourselves.
we don't love ourselves
Yeah,
enough.
yeah.
Everybody struggles with that. So self-kindness means putting that supportive arm over your own shoulder like you would a friend who's struggling. The second piece is common humanity. And that's the connection of knowing that we're all flawed works in progress. And part of being human is we're going to go through stuff. We're going to suffer. So when I hear you share, and my perception of you is you've got it all together. And then I hear you share like, oh my God, you're going through that too.
Yeah.
So it's actually what connects us all.
Although that's a nice way of thinking it.
Yeah. It's what
That's
connects
usually not
us.
even what we're really thinking. Is like, oh, he's just as whatever as me. Is like,
But I think about at my very rock
Sure.
bottom, lying on my couch, not being able to get off my couch because I'm just so derailed from anxiety and just the depression of it. And I thought I was the only one going through this. So it was like, poor me, I'm the victim. I'm so self-absorbed in the story of it that I don't think anybody else is going through it. But actually, there's a lot of people going through it. So it's actually what connects us.
yeah. I'm reminded of when I did my yoga teacher training back in. Did I ever even tell you I did yoga teacher training?
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
yeah.
So when I did it back in, it was really for my practice. Just I wanted to learn more about the body. But there was an experience that I had during my training when I went to a class, and this was just a practice night. So we were just practicing actually. And I remember, or maybe it was in between class or something. But I remember getting to my mat and just having a complete experience. It was just, for me, yoga seems like it's a very spiritual practice, and oftentimes just the act of being on my mat is almost like a sacred space, like it's just become sacred space for me. I mean, I'm almost moved to tears many times when I get back on my mat. But I remember this one time in January, I got on my mat, the class started, and the moment I was on my mat, I just started crying. And almost for the entire class, it was right near the end when I finally kind of stopped sobbing. I'm like, what is going on here? And then I remembered it was the anniversary of my brother's death. And I wasn't even thinking about that all day long, but it was just the moment of being on on my mat and how healing that was, just being on the mat. So can you say like a word or two about some of those, I don't know, some of those miraculous type experiences that you've noticed just from being on the mat?
Yeah, so
and
much.
showing up to the practice.
Yeah, so I would first say with everything you said is I have a lot of sayings, but one of the sayings is in order to heal, we have to feel. And if I go back to my story of not wanting to feel the emotional pain of the loss of baseball, I numbed it. I didn't want to feel it. Yoga, we roll out our mats, we get into our bodies, and we get to feel our bodies, which means we ultimately get to heal our bodies. And this is that third component of mindfulness, or of self-compassion, mindful self-compassion. Staying with the pain long enough, staying in the challenge, whatever it is, long enough to actually meet it with a little awareness and self-compassion, to be able to breathe through it. And then, but also not holding on to it so long that we over-identify or exaggerate the story. So meeting our edge and softening, getting to our edge in a yoga posture, getting comfortable being uncomfortable, and actually being able to use the breath as a tool to work through it and actually loosen the grip. And so sometimes I think we're holding on so tight, and it can be a yoga pose, or it could be a relationship, or it could be a thought. And the moment we actually notice it, soften, we loosen the grip, and we feel this enormous release of tension. And so I guess to bring it all together, it has to do with being in our bodies, to feel our bodies. To be in our body, we have to be connected to the breath. And so if we can access the breath, we can get into our bodies, we can feel, and we can heal. And so much healing comes up in the yoga practice, because we actually get to quiet down the mind. We're not on our phones. We don't have stressors being thrown at us every direction. It's just us and our breath.
So I think all transformation, and I call, just a yoga practice, meditation practice, mindfulness practice, all, as part of that transformative type experience. But I think all of that has an element of, we can find some humor in it all. So what would be, if you were to look back at your yoga career and just even being a mindfulness coach, what would be a couple things that you just brought you to complete laughter because just kind of saw the bigger picture of everything?
Well, the biggest thing is that I didn't grow up saying I want to be a yoga teacher. Like, that was not part of the plan.
Yeah.
So that's laughable to me. The fact that if I look at the evolution of my life and everything that's happened that's led me to this moment, the fact that I get to do this and to think of what I thought I was going to do, or what I thought society told me I needed to do in order to be successful and to be happy and free, and to see what I am doing now, I can't help but laugh.
Yeah.
But it also makes me so grateful and gets me so excited to know that I get to do this. Yeah. And if it saved my life, then in a sense, am I in the business of saving lives? Like, I believe so.
Sure.
And my wound of addiction has given me an access point to a greater purpose in life. So the wound of it, my addiction used to bury me in guilt and shame. And so today, how it's my best asset,
for sure.
Like, that's almost laughable too, to think of some of the decisions I made and the person that I was led me to this moment.
Sure.
It's hard not to just chuckle, but then also be filled with so much gratitude.
And the kind of seeing, there's an element of peace about it, because you realize just how easy everything can be when you get into that flow. So you brought it up a couple times now. One of my favorite words is, let's talk a little bit about your gratitude practice. What have you noticed from having a gratitude practice, and what brings you to gratitude?
So my gratitude practice, when I first started doing it, was the 5-minute journal. And Jamie, my girlfriend, and I think she got one for me, and we started doing them. And it helped that we were both doing it, because we could show each other, or we would be accountable, or we would do them together, so we would be more consistent on doing it. And so that's where it really started. But I would do talks or weave themes of gratitude into my practices. And for me, gratitude changes the way I see the world. If I come from a place of lack or I'm the victim, like, it's really hard to see the good. So gratitude turns whatever I have today into enough. And the gratitude is about connecting to the heart. When we see from the heart and we see from a place of gratitude, we see all the love that's all around us. If we're not thankful for everything we have and everything we don't have, then we're blinded by, like, the possibility and the opportunity and the gift of this one life that we have.
What's the gift that you have discovered for yourself inside of having 7+ surgeries and the knee issues and coming out of baseball because of it?
My gift is my past. My gift is my past, because I don't know. I believe that if I wouldn't have gone through everything I did, I would be living a life of materialism, thinking that happiness is defined by the amount of money I have in my bank account, the car I'm driving, the house I have. And although those things are nice and great, I know a lot of people that have all of that and they are not happy.
Mm-hmm.
And so the fact that my past has led me to this and allowed me to see what's really most important, that it's actually about love and service.
Mm-hmm.
The core of addiction, they say, is selfishness and self-centeredness. At least when I did my fourth and fifth step, it was screaming selfishness and self-centeredness. So the antidote and the beauty and the magic of 12-step programs is the service work. So getting out of ourselves and being of service and helping others, like that is what it's all about.
For sure. That's what lights me up the most about, this whole process and developing the app is really working more with our ambassador program. And because it's so community driven and service driven, that it is what wakes me up every day now. It's just like that, developing that and being able to be of service bigger and bigger and bigger, and just having that expand and have it be all about community is, for me, is definitely completely in alignment with what my soul purpose or my soul desire even wants.
And one thing I would add to what you just said is that often gets taken for granted. So there's a lot of gifts of the yoga practice and personal development, but what often I will forget about sometimes is the people. So the people that I've connected with and my friends today that I met because of yoga. My teachers, my biggest inspirations, some of the most amazing people in the world, my own girlfriend, like all of these things came into my life, I believe, because of yoga. So that blows my mind to think of my tribe and the people in my life and the people I can look up to and aspire to. They might have a little of something that I want, and almost all of them come from, in some way or another, the yoga world.
So they say your vibe attracts your tribe.
Yes.
So you've got a pretty good tribe going on. So what does your soul desire to experience in this moment of time that would have it be fulfilled?
So now it's just more, how can I talk about service and I still don't feel like I'm doing near enough. I talk about it all the time, but then I question, like, are you really living this thing called service? And so, yes, talking about it and sharing my story, which to many people might seem like, wow, he's so vulnerable about his story, but that's not really vulnerable to me anymore. That's just part of my story.
Sure.
Getting on stage and talking in front of a bunch of people, being seen, not teaching yoga, but actually speaking, that's vulnerability. But really what's on my heart is I'm lost a couple friends this last month from mental illness and addiction, and it just seems like they're dropping like flies, and that's it's really hard, and it breaks my heart, and I go through the grieving process of the loss, but really a couple days after I get inspired. What breaks my heart more than anything in the world are the friends and families that get left behind when one of their loved ones passes away. And so I can't help but think about, like, what if my mom had to wake up every single day knowing that, like, she's not going to see her baby boy ever again. Like, that is the thing that gets me more than anything. So really what's on my heart is bringing, I have a coaching program called The Shift, Transformation of the Mind, Body, Soul, and I'm moving the program or adding an online program. And so in the next month, the online program will launch, and then about a month after that, the shift into sobriety will launch. So that'll be another 90-day program that'll be offered for really anybody wanting freedom from any type of addiction they might have.
Beautiful.
And so I think that piece of it and opening those doors will open up the doors to more things in the recovery world.
Sure. And then just to kind of finish up, how would you share with someone that you see so much possibility for them, and they don't, like in those early stages when you would be going to 12-step program, and you would be in the program, but it wasn't until you reached a point where you actually woke up and you could hear more of what there was to actually hear. So the question really is about, ending suffering and really waking up and remembering who you are as part of God's image. So how would you guide somebody in that transition to help spark that
I would anchor in on if they want help, because if they're not ready, they're not ready, and there's nothing I can say that's going to make it sound, that's not going to get them ready.
Yeah.
But when they're ready, there's nothing I can say that won't sound, because they're ready to do it.
Yeah.
Honesty, open-mindedness, willingness is the anchor. You anchor in on those and you go all in. If you want it, you'll never have to drink or use another day in your life. And even if it's not sobriety, and this is just part of the coaching, like whatever you're wanting,
Relationships.
go all in on those three, and you will not fail.
Yeah.
So I think that's a big piece of it for me. And then it's just being open to suggestion, being okay with listening, knowing that you're not your thoughts. Let go of the story. The only story that matters is the one we tell ourselves, right? And the only relationship that matters, or the most important one, is the one we have with ourselves.
Yeah.
So I am on this little love yourself. I do a retreat called Love Yourself Too, but we weren't taught this in school.
No.
We weren't taught how to focus our mind. We weren't taught how to take care of ourselves. And so, again, going back to that whole self-love thing, being able to make sure that we are taking care of ourselves before we show up for the world.
Sure. Perfect. Well said. It was a good place to pause and move on. Thank you very much. Thanks for being here and for sharing your story and for inspiring others with what you do and who you are every single day as you show up.
Thank you. It's an honor to be. Yeah, it's an honor to be here. And as you can see, we could probably talk about this all day long.
Forever. All right, brother. Thank you.
Thank you.
Love you.
Love you, buddy.
Yeah.